This is the OSEE GoStream Duet 8 ISO, which aside from being a mouthful is a little bit of a confusing name, and we'll get to why in a second. And when I started testing this thing, honestly, I wanted to hate it so bad. There were so many things about it that felt super weird that I was gonna bash this so hard during this review. And then I kept using it. And then I kept using it. And I realized I think this is actually perfect for what I need for my church. So let me talk about it a little bit. First off, at first glance, this just seems like a switcher that has no real identity with the types of features that they crammed into this thing. It's kind of ridiculous all the things that this can do and all the different ways that it can do it. First off is the naming. Like I said, the Duet 8 ISO. So when you hear that and when you look at it, it seems like there's 8 inputs, right? And there kind of are, but not in the way that you would think. So on the back, you have 4 HDMI and 4 SDI inputs. And so that seems like great, you have 4 of each, 8 total. But actually those 4 are either or. It's actually just inputs 1 through 4, and you can use either the HDMI or the SDI for any given input, which is weird, but also kind of useful if maybe you're super flexible in what types of sources that you need to hook up to this thing. And since we're talking about the actual IO on this thing, let's kind of keep going. Also on the back, you will see you have dual XLR inputs, mic 1 and 2. And that's super cool to see because on most things that this competes with, you're gonna just get an 1/8 inch jack. So that's kind of cool to see a full size XLR on there. Next up, you have an Ethernet port for your network control, which is interesting and not what you'd expect. So we'll get to that later as well. Next, we have USB 1 and 2. And those are cool because not only can they be used for recording to an external disk, but they can also be used to plug into your computer as a webcam input. So you see that on most switchers, but it's cool to see that you have 2 so you can actually record and be using this webcam output both at the same time. Moving right along, you also have another mic 1 and 2, but this time they are those 1/8 inch jacks. So you can kind of have your cake and eat it too, I guess. Next, you've got your power plug. It is threaded, which is great to see on something like this. Then those 4 inputs like we talked about before that are either HDMI or SDI. And then finally, you have your 3 outputs. Now output 1 is SDI, and then outputs 2 and 3 are HDMI. And then finally, a headphone jack, which doesn't seem like it's that exciting, but when you look at the ATEM Mini or all those other ATEM lines, rarely do you get any way to actually monitor the audio going into it. So it's super cool to see a headphone jack put there so that you have a way to actually listen to the audio that's going into this thing, or more realistically, coming out of this thing. And then finally, your power switch, which again, you wouldn't think in 2025 I'd be that excited for a physical power switch, but here we are. There is one more bit of IO, and it's actually on the front. You actually have an SD card slot. And again, that can be used to actually load content onto this or record directly to that SD card. That's the IO on this thing. Like I said, it's not what you'd expect by hearing the name, but it is pretty full featured for something this size and this price. So one of the reasons that I think this could actually be good for me is because of the way that we have our live stream set up. So if you guys have been following me for a while, you know this, but for those of you who are new, we do all of our switching on an ATEM constellation. So that's where all of our cameras come in, all of our sources, and our output comes out. But then we feed that into an ATEM Mini Pro ISO. And so we feed it a program feed and a clean feed, and then also a video feed from OBS to use as a bumper video right at the front. This allows us to have that second layer between our actual camera switching and the live stream in case we ever need to test things on cameras or anything like that. Plus allows us to have a couple different recordings to use in post. So we have that second layer already. And I think that's where this thing could actually slot in really nicely. And I'll get to why in a little bit and how exactly it's different than the ATEM Mini Pro in those ways. But let's actually take a look at the buttons across the front really quick, and then we'll plug it in and I'll kind of show you how this thing works. So first of all, we do have 1 through 8 inputs. So like I said, you can use 8 inputs, and I'll show you how in a minute, but they're not all plugged in the same way that you'd think. Then you have some buttons here to actually determine what the output HDMI is direct to. Your audio mixer to determine if things are on or audio follows video or what have you, as well as a volume knob to control that. Then you've got some macros to pull up. Nice to see hardware buttons for those. A couple different things to control your media players, as well as just normal settings. And then also your recording, your video playback, your keyers, and then over here is your actual live stream button, as well as, look at that, a T-bar, which is interesting to see on a thing at this price point. But let's go ahead and get this guy plugged in and kind of talk through what we're seeing here. So first off, right off the bat, we have our multi-view here. And we can see 8 inputs, the preview, a media player 1, a super source, your program, and your audio. Now, this is not personally how I love my multi-view to be set up and displayed. So I will show there is actually a multi-view button here on the GoStream. And if you hit that, it actually changes your format a little bit to where you get inputs 1 through 4, then both your media players and a super source, and the classic side-by-side preview and program. Now you do lose a lot of your inputs when you're doing that, but that's where you are. Now if we hit it again, it takes us back to the other one. So there's no other multi-view customization other than just switching it between these two options, which I'm glad that there is some, but it just doesn't feel like that's really enough on this device given the number of inputs that you could potentially have. So the next thing here is actually how you configure any settings on this player. Everything that you do has to be done using an on-screen menu. Now, if you hit this menu button right here, you can see it pull up in the corner there. Now, it is pretty cool that you get an on-screen menu. I mean, again, if you look at the ATEM line of things, you can't do anything on the screen. Everything has to be done through a software client. The problem is, though, is that you can't do anything through a software client. And this isn't anything to do with OSEE GoStreams in general. Their other devices actually can be controlled over the network on a computer. And if you install their software on your computer, it will find this and connect to it. But whenever you try to control things, it controls things you're not expecting it to do. It seems like whatever protocol they're using, they've changed some of those commands up, and so they just don't play nicely together anymore. Now, I would like to believe that that's coming soon, maybe, hopefully. I mean, this device is already out, so it's crazy to me that they don't have a way to control it from a computer, but I mean, here we are. I don't really want to buy anything on the hope that they're going to fix something so important as having the software control, but this is the position we're in. Also, while we're talking about the software control, the way that you actually install it is crazy. On OSEE's website, you actually go to a Google Drive link and then download a zip file with an installer. It's just, I don't know, it feels like Sketch City to me when you compare it to just a hosted download directly on your site. Hopefully it's fine because I installed it, but here we are. Anyway, so to actually move through some of these settings, you do everything with this rotary knob here that's actually on the device itself, and then you click into the settings. So for example, changing your different color settings, or we have this super source built in, so you can choose a different template or what shows up in the actual windows, and then a graphic for the background. You can set up your keyers and what type you're using, whether that's a downstream key 1 or 2. Setting up your transitions, that's pretty simple stuff. Auto switching, this switcher does have auto switching. So essentially you can turn this on and have 2 different audio sources, and depending on which audio source is actually coming in, it will automatically switch from one camera to the next. So this would be great for a podcast scenario, for example. Not really super helpful in a church setting, I wouldn't imagine, but cool to see. Next is your audio mixer settings, where you can actually configure different settings for your individual audio sources. Most of the time it's just kind of turning it on or off and then setting levels, but here you are. Next up is your media player. So in here, you can actually select whether your media player is a still image or is a browser source, which I was able to do earlier. Oh, there we go. I guess only media player 2. I'm learning some of this stuff live with you guys. So you can actually set it up to be a browser source, which I've seen be useful if you want to set it up to H2R graphics or something like that you can use for overlays. But otherwise, you can actually just put any URL in there that you want, and that URL will then be used as one of your inputs, which is pretty cool. But otherwise, you can just pick a still image that you've uploaded. And so in here, you can see I've got a couple to choose from to actually use then on this drive, and I can change which index they're set to. So these settings are a little bit confusing in my opinion to do directly on here, because if you guys didn't understand that, what's actually happening here is I'm choosing, hey, there are 32 slots on the device that I can put an image, and then I have some images on my hard drive that's plugged in. And so I choose which one from there that I want to load into which slot here. So let's say slot 4, and I want to load this image here. And boom, now it's in slot 4. It's not super clear that you're doing that, but that's how it works. All right, then you can program some macros. You can actually save scenes. I haven't really played around with this, but it seems kind of cool if you can save some presets essentially to use based on different things. Next is your stream settings. And this is when we start to see the fact that there's no software control really become a problem. Now, it was already a problem with some of those other settings. It would be a real pain to configure it with just that rotary knob. But all of a sudden with your stream settings, how do I actually get my stream key in here? You know, how am I supposed to do that? Well, you have to actually create a text file and pull that in order to actually pull in those stream settings. And to be totally honest, I haven't even tried it yet because I don't fully know how. So there's that. I think you have to create some sort of file that has these different settings in it, but the files are kind of big and gross looking, so I am not going to actually test that. You don't really want to have to do this without being able to use a software control to type the values in directly there. Having to do it this way feels pretty archaic and not great for a product you paid almost $1,000 for. Okay, so I forgot to mention that when you are live streaming, you can actually stream to 3 different destinations all at the same time. So as long as you have enough bandwidth to actually handle that, you don't need to use anything like Restream ever again, because you can stream to all your different destinations all directly from your device. And that's super cool. Moving down the line, playback. So if we look at playback, you actually have the ability to play back 2 different video sources at any given time, have them loaded in, which is one of the reasons that I think this would be super cool for my church, right? We use this as a second layer, like I said, and one of the sources that we send in is a video that we play through OBS to use as a bumper video, because you can't load videos in as sources on an ATEM Mini. But on here we can. I have a hard drive over here and it has a set of videos loaded onto it, and we can use those as inputs, and I'll show you here in a second, and then you can just start playing them, and you can have them loop if they're kind of a motion background or something, or you can have it automatically switch to another input or to your preview whenever it finishes, whatever you need to do. So that is a super cool setting and would be awesome for us for our bumper video. So this could be a thing that we make use of. Next up, you have your record settings. Really, you're just looking at file name, and then when you're recording an ISO, what channels you want to record. And this is another thing that actually is super awesome about the GoStream that the ATEM Mini Pro ISO doesn't have, right? Because like I said, one of my channels is actually just a video input, and I don't care about recording that because it's the same every week, but I want to ISO the other channels, but I don't want to eat up all that hard drive space. Well, this one you can actually pick and choose what you're actually recording. All right, next up, your inputs. Source selection. This is interesting. So you can choose on each of these inputs between SDI or HDMI. It does seem like it auto selects those, so it doesn't seem like this is super necessary unless maybe you have a source plugged into both of those at the same time. So that's for inputs 1 through 4. Now, when we get to inputs 5 through 8, this is where it gets interesting. So input 5 can be your media player 1, or it can be actually an SRT or RTMP stream that you are consuming, or an NDI source. Now, again, if we're thinking about churches, probably going to be your player or an NDI source. The SRT RTMP stream is pretty cool if you are bringing in remote guests or something like that to some sort of a conference. That's not really something I see us ever needing, but it is cool to know that this does it. But if you have NDI cameras, such as some sort of PTZ cameras or something, that would be super awesome to use here. I'm pretty sure it's only NDI HX. It would be a great thing to confirm though, if that's something that you're looking to use. It would be awesome if they supported both, but I'm not really fully sure on that at this point because I don't have any NDI sources or any need for that. If we look at input 6, you have those same options, and then input 7 is actually NDI, that SRT RTMP, or USB 1 camera. So like I said, you have those USB-C ports on the back, and those can be set up to be webcams rather than USB that is actually recording. So those are your 8 inputs. Then you can see your URLs for those streams, your NDI sources, or the color space for your different inputs. Then if you look at outputs, you can set your format. You can set what actually goes out to those different HDMIs or SDI on the back. Now you can do that directly on here by selecting which output you care about and then sending what source you want to it. So you can actually do that on the fly directly from the surface. I don't know how useful this is for most people, but it is kind of cool to see like some slight video hub features there. Now we've got audio source, which is again that same type of thing where you can choose what audio is going out along with those HDMIs, which is kind of cool to see because then you can have whatever audio source you want to go with it. Your color space and the quality of your recording and streaming. And then finally, you just have version numbers. If you have 2 hard drives plugged in here, you can choose what gets recorded where. I honestly don't know what this does. Oh, there you go, little safe markers on your preview. your network information, and then button brightness, setting a profile, your language, and then just advanced and user guide. So you can see there's a lot of things in that menu that you would need to control at any given time. And a lot of it would be way better to use on a computer. Now, we talked about there not being official software support for this yet. And it's not just their software control, it's also Companion. If you go into BitFocus Companion and try to control this using the OStream module, it's exactly the same as if you use their software control, just slightly different behaviors based on the buttons that you're pushing. So it would be great to see full Companion support built in as well. So we'll see. Again, they have a firmware update coming, so maybe that will fix some of those issues, but I don't want to buy something like this based on future promises. And technically they haven't even promised it, I'm just kind of hoping. All right, so I talked about those media players. So to show those in action, over here I can press player 1, and then it will actually let me select from a list of files that I have loaded onto this hard drive. So if I select, say, Holy Roar, great. And then player 2, now this is interesting. You see the video can't be played, please choose another video. I'm honestly not sure what's causing that message. I think it might be because it's a 4K video. I'm not positive though. And it would be really great if it could down convert it rather than doing this, because that's the only thing I can think of as a reason why this would be true. But anyway, now that we have those videos loaded in, if we actually hit one of those inputs, it will start playing that video just like it was any other input source. And then you have a few different video controls here, so we can pause the video, we can go to the next, skip to the end, skip to the front if you needed to, and you can do that for either video, or if you want to start playing it beforehand. Again, I would love to see more fine-grained controls, and hopefully there are in the software control whenever that gets built out, but it's cool to see something. Now, you may have seen down below my super source, if we go ahead and select that, and whoops, I forgot to set that up right. So we can go over here to our template, and window 1, we will change to be source 1. So you can see it's not super hard to actually use that super source, but, and it is cool that you can change it directly on the device rather than having to go through some sort of software menu, but it would be nice if you had the options. We touched on audio earlier, but if you want to look at the audio control, you can just say input 1, and then you can actually change the volume with this rotary dial. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see it over there in the multi-view as well. Anyway, and you can do that for all of your different inputs and turn them on or off or whatever. So that is the device. It's how it works. It's everything that it does. And honestly, for the most part, it works pretty well. But for $850, it feels a little buggy. It feels a little unfinished. For example, as I mentioned before, the inflexibility of the multi-view. I would love to be able to configure this a lot more to actually match exactly what I need from it, rather than having just these two predefined options that frankly don't show me enough inputs. And speaking of the multi-view, I don't know if you guys noticed, but it's kind of laggy. As I wave my hands and stuff, if you look at the program feed versus the multi-view, or even if you look at the videos playing in both places, the multi-view inputs lag a lot. And I mean, that's manageable, but it kind of stinks to see on a device like this, especially when you're comparing it to an ATEM, when those multi-views are perfectly smooth, just like anything else. It kind of doesn't give me a lot of confidence in what I'm seeing there before I actually take it live. So that kind of stinks to see. However, I will say, your recordings, if you're doing an ISO recording, which I imagine you are if you're buying this device, are totally fine. Even though things look laggy there, it's just the display there, they come across fine on your recordings, as long as you're using a high-speed drive. I made the mistake at first of not having something high-speed enough, and the output from it was very compressed, very not good looking. So once I switched out to a high-speed SSD, everything was totally fine, but just keep that in mind. However, if you're doing an ISO recording, it's worth noting that the ISO shots and the actual program feed look a little different and are not perfectly time aligned. And maybe that was an issue with me and not having all my frame rates consistent. I'm not fully sure at this point. I didn't dig in deep enough. But when I look at these, when I switch between program and the ISO feed, they don't match, whether color or whether the actual frames. They're a couple of frames off. So I don't love that. I don't know how often I would need to be switching between those, but it does kind of stink to see that hypothetically my program feed is actually getting colored a little bit differently than my actual input. Another thing that I noticed is when I plugged this into my computer into OBS and tried to use it as a webcam output, use the webcam output into my laptop as a webcam input, it was completely unusable. The lag was I mean, insane. I have a video here to show it of just my mouse moving across the screen, and it's crazy. It would be impossible to use this in any kind of setting at all. So I don't know if that is unique to me, but kind of stinks to have that feature advertised and not be able to use it. So I've kind of been hinting about this a lot during this video, but I think it's obvious that the big comparison for this device is the ATEM Mini Pro ISO models. And they have an HDMI model and an SDI model. And the SDI model is $875, so pretty comparable to this. But the HDMI is only $550. Now, this technically has more inputs, but they're NDI sources or SRT streams or counting the video players as a source, which, to be fair, is one of the sources I'm using in my 4 sources, so you could argue that that's a fair comparison. The other thing is that on this, you can actually choose between SDI or HDMI. If that's not really something that matters to you though, that's kind of a feature that, like, whatever, why am I paying for that if all I need are HDMI? But in my situation, most of my inputs are actually coming from my ATEM constellation, so are SDI, and I'm converting them to HDMI to actually go into my device. And that's kind of a conversion that I hate to have to keep making. So this seems like the flexibility of this would actually be pretty nice for me. But it kind of just feels like it lacks the polish that the ATEM Minis have. And I know it might be silly to say an ATEM Mini has polish, but again, the software control, the control of the multi-view, seeing your streaming metrics and recording metrics in a nice way on your multi-view, good support articles, just an overall cleaner interface, I feel like. Although it is nice that you can do things on device here, it just kind of feels like they shoehorned a ton of features in here without finishing a lot of them. Everything just feels a little bit half-baked, like it's almost awesome, except for this. It's almost great, except for this. It has this awesome feature, but it's missing this other random thing. To me, the ATEM Mini Pro is maybe less full-featured than this, but everything just works. And that's kind of something that I need from any device that I'm using in my live production workflow. So what's my final stance on this then? Honestly, it's kind of hard to know. I think overall, I like it. It's got a lot of cool features, a lot of things that I could really use. But honestly, without having the companion software to go along with it to be able to control things, it's kind of a hard sell for me. And it's nothing against OSEE GoStream devices. I mean, their cheaper offerings are awesome and really get the job done, and honestly have, I think, some of the features more baked out than this one does. But like I said, this kind of sits in a weird place with some of its features. And some of those features are so weird, if you don't really need them, I just don't really know if this is the device for you that I would suggest buying. I mean, if you don't know that you're gonna be switching back and forth between HDMI and SDI, and this is more of a permanent installation thing, I would probably just go for the ones you need on the Blackmagic side. Now, if you do need that flexibility and these other things are not really deal breakers for you, then this might be the device for you. It's got some quirks, it's got its own little hiccups, but it is pretty flexible and it does a lot of things pretty well. And look, hopefully they get these bugs worked out. I mean, hopefully there's fixes coming for all the things I just mentioned, because competition, especially in this space, is always great. And I feel like Blackmagic has gotten kind of lazy with their ATEM Mini line. Now, I know they just came out with the, what do they call it? The ATEM Mini Extreme ISO G2 Live Switcher, another mouthful of a switcher. And that looks awesome, but is also kind of a lot for people looking in this line. I mean, it's like $2,000. Is that right? Yeah, $2,000. And has 8 actual inputs that you can plug into, but they're all HDMI. It's got a cooler control surface, but again, $2,000. Like, we're really getting out of this realm of actually being an ATEM Mini, right? So in this price point, I really think we just need some competition. And so I really hope that OSEE can figure out its issues and make this guy a real competitor to ATEM. So back to the original proposition of using this for my stream, I think as soon as they work those bugs out and get me some remote control of it, I'm all over it. But until then, it's just not for me. But maybe it's for you. Only you can decide. Until next time.